All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking some seriously counterintuitive mental models, the kind that actually separate the extraordinarily wealthy from, well, everyone else. We're going to decode the specific frameworks used by highly successful people, drawing directly from the insights of entrepreneur Kunal Shah. Now, if you're sitting there thinking success is just about grinding hard or, I don't know, inheriting a massive trust fund, you might want to buckle up. Get ready to have your perspective totally shifted, because I promise you, they absolutely do not teach these lessons in business school.
Look at this statement for a second. You will never see a wealthy person who's terrible at keeping secrets. It's so simple, right? But it instantly shatters this whole illusion we have that being a massive social butterfly is what builds real power. It completely flips the modern narrative on its head. This idea that we somehow need to constantly broadcast every single detail of our lives just to seem important. Actually, scratch that. Broadcasting is exactly the opposite of what the elite do.
So to figure out how they actually operate, we are going to explore 5 distinct frameworks today. We'll look at why the wealthy keep secrets, escaping through obsessive curiosity, long-term versus short-term thinking, the 4 pillars of trust, and finally, the actual power of shamelessness.
Okay, jumping right into section 1, the wealthy keep secrets and why gossip essentially destroys wealth.
This perfectly illustrates the massive divide. On one hand, you have average folks who essentially trade secrets just to be liked in the moment. Gossiping to stay relevant at the water cooler and seeking that quick hit of short-term validation. But the wealthy, they operate like literal vaults. They are hoarders of what we call asymmetric insights. By holding on to valuable information instead of just spilling it for a cheap reaction, they become these highly trusted, incredibly powerful nodes within their networks.
And here's another huge distinction. It is totally great to be insightful, right? To deeply understand the why behind how things work. But the wealthy take it a whole step further. They are insanely resourceful. They literally do not think in terms of obstacles, they think entirely in outcomes. If there's a roadblock in the way, they aren't going to just sit back and analyze it to death. No way. They hunt down a solution and just make things happen. They're the exact people you call when everything's on fire because their focus is just 100% on execution.
Moving along to section 2, escaping through obsessive curiosity, which is really the true engine of drive.
You see, extraordinary success is very rarely born out of some warm, positive inspiration. It's actually way darker than that. It's almost always a desperate, burning need to escape a painful status quo. Highly driven people, they don't sit around watching motivational speakers. Why? Because they are actively running away from something huge, whether that's past trauma, a deep fear of irrelevance, or just the absolute terror of being poor. They are literally running from a reality they absolutely refuse to accept.
And the way these ultra-successful individuals process that fear is just completely different from the rest of us. It basically follows a clear 3-step progression. First, they experience that underlying fear or trauma. But then, and this is the kicker, step 2, they convert that fear into an obsessive, relentless curiosity about how the world actually works. Then, step 3, they execute continuously through this kind of self-fueling mechanism. So risk suddenly becomes this fascinating puzzle they are driven to solve, rather than something that just paralyzes them.
We're talking about a state that borders on obsession, a self-fueled drive to just repeat a difficult pattern endlessly. Picture an elite athlete training for 8 hours a day in a completely empty gym, or a tech founder grinding on product code at 3 a.m. There's no audience, nobody is clapping. The work is physically and mentally exhausting, but they just cannot live without repeating that pattern until they reach absolute elite mastery. Which brings us to section 3, long-term versus short-term, or as I like to call it, the biology of wealth.
So there's actually a biological battle happening inside your head right now. All that joyful short-term stuff, that comes straight from the amygdala, your lizard brain. It's hardwired for fight or flight, sure, but in our modern world, it's mostly just hunting for instant gratification. A sugar rush, fast fashion, a quick dopamine hit. But enduring wealth, that requires letting the neocortex actually take the steering wheel. That is your long-term brain. It's what builds complex skills, protects your health, establishes a stellar reputation, and ultimately creates lasting wealth. The highly successful are simply better at telling that lizard brain to be quiet.
And it is tough because the modern world absolutely bombards us with short-term dopamine, practically tricking us into settling for average. Biologically speaking, the comfort zone feels so safe. We crave those immediate social media likes, and we are terrified, absolutely terrified, of failing in public. Plus, without the literal life-or-death pressure of true financial starvation, most of us simply never adapt. We just stay right where it's cozy.
But if you want to build anything remotely extraordinary, you've got to remember this. Comfort zone is a very infertile land. It keeps you perfectly safe, yes, for sure, but absolutely nothing of lasting value or wealth will ever grow there. You literally have to actively choose discomfort if you ever want to break out of being average.
All right, let's dive right into Section 4, the 4 pillars of trust, which is the absolute foundation of society.
Think about this for a second. Why in the world do we instantly trust a digital payment app to transfer our hard-earned money, but we heavily doubt the word of our own friends and peers? It's such a fascinating question, and the answer isn't some random accident. It's because the app mathematically fulfills a very specific set of criteria that human beings are subconsciously hardwired to look for.
To be viewed as genuinely trustworthy, you essentially have to operate like a flawless algorithm built on these 4 pillars. Number 1, uncompromising integrity. Number 2, predictable consistency, so people know exactly what to expect from you every single time. Number 3, actual competence, so they know you can pull off the job. And number 4, benevolence, basically proving you aren't just in it for yourself. If you want to build any real wealth and influence, this right here is your blueprint.
And the crazy thing is, if visibly any of these 4 pillars are absent, trust just evaporates entirely. Imagine a paragliding instructor. They could be perfectly honest, super consistent, totally well-meaning, but if they lack the actual competence of having flown a paraglider before, they are utterly useless to you, right? To command true respect, you've got to embody all 4 of these traits so thoroughly that people can rely on you without even a second thought.
Let's move to our final segment, Section 5, the power of shamelessness, and how to go about actively happening to the world.
Now, being shameless isn't about being totally inappropriate or obnoxious, not at all. It's about the complete removal of reluctance, resistance, and that crippling fear of social judgment. It's having the ability to ruthlessly pursue a goal, actively happening to the world, simply because you refuse to be paralyzed by the imaginary thought of looking a little bit foolish.
Way too many ambitious people fail simply because they are overly protective of a super fragile ego or some imaginary personal brand image that doesn't even exist yet. You've got to learn to ask for help, even if it makes you feel small. Double text someone without any ego if you need an answer. Seriously, face the sheer terror of sending that second text. Treat rejection not as some massive personal failure, but just as raw, useful data. If you can shed your shame, you are automatically going to outcompete everyone else who is just sitting there paralyzed by it.
Ultimately, this whole shebang boils down to one fundamental choice. Do you want the cheap thrill of being liked or the heavy crown of being respected? Because being liked is easy. It just requires conforming to fleeting trends and participating in the latest gossip. But being respected, that is profoundly long-term. It is incredibly difficult, and it demands unwavering consistency, real power, and measurable results.
So I want to leave you with this provocative thought today. I urge you to take a hard look and analyze which brain, your amygdala or your neocortex, is currently running your life. Are you driven by the short-term need to be liked, gossiping just to fit in, and hiding out in your cozy, infertile comfort zone? Or are you driven by the long-term desire to be respected, mastering your craft through obsessive curiosity and shamelessly happening to the world? Well, thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I hope this sparks something for you. Start applying these frameworks today, and I'll see you next time.